You think family feuds are just petty squabbles. You believe jealousy only leads to a few hurt feelings. Prepare to have that belief shattered forever. The story you are about to hear will prove that a hidden prophecy and a simmering resentment can bend the destiny of an entire empire. It will pull you through the dust of time on the legendary Silk Road, a place not just of silks and spices, but of deadly conspiracies and lives crushed under the wheels of fate. This is no fairy tale. This is a truth buried beneath the endless dunes, a story of ultimate betrayal and a forgiveness so profound it borders on the divine. And I promise you, its ending, the Father's secret, will make you reevaluate everything you have just heard. It will completely change the meaning of the story. But before we turn the page on this tragic, epic saga, do me a small favor. Leave a comment and let me know where in the world you are listening from and what time it is right now. I want to know in what corners of the globe the fire of these great stories is being lit. Now, take a deep breath. We begin. In the magnificent oasis city of Palmyra, a glittering jewel set in the vast desert where the legendary Silk Road trade routes intersected like the arteries of the ancient world, there was a powerful merchant clan led by the venerable patriarch Zorian. Under his roof, 11 sons grew up to the sounds of camels and the scent of frankincense and cinnamon. But among them, one was always different. That was Kaelen, the second youngest son, a young man who carried in his eyes not the image of familiar cargo, but an entire starry sky of dreams and aspirations. While his older brothers, led by Darius, the strong and proud firstborn, saw only profit in the established trade routes, Kaelen saw new lands, new trade routes no one dared to travel, opportunities that could lift their clan beyond its safe but stagnant shadow. He did not just talk about them, he lived in them. Every night, strange dreams came to Kaelen, not as fragmented images, but as vivid films of power, of sheaves of wheat bowing down, of the sun, the moon, and 11 stars prostrating themselves before his own. And it was these dreams, along with the somewhat unusual attention their father Zorian showered upon him, that planted a toxic seed in the hearts of his brothers. They did not understand, or did not want to understand, why Zorian listened to Kaelen's fanciful tales with such strange intensity, why he had a robe made for him with the most exquisite threads, a clear symbol of favor. To Darius and the others, it was not encouragement, it was an insult. The family's legacy was built on sweat and caution, not on sleep-talking. They saw Kaelen not as the future, but as a threat, an extravagance that could shatter the order their forefathers had bled to establish. The conflict was no longer merely between brothers. It had escalated to a new level, a war between the legacy of tradition and the destiny of innovation. On one side, clinging to the past, on the other, risking it all for a greater future. The jealousy, watered daily by whispers and resentful glances, grew into a monstrous tree of hatred, eclipsing all brotherly love. They began to hate him, a bitter, profound hatred to the point where they no longer wanted to speak to him. They just waited for an opportunity to extinguish that star they deemed so arrogant before it had the chance to shine and burn away everything they held dear. And then, under the scorching desert sun, that opportunity arrived, more cruel and cold than any sandstorm. That opportunity came disguised as a trade mission, a shipment deliberately arranged leading to a distant and dangerous region where rumors of fierce bandits were a constant terror for merchant caravans. Darius, with the solemn face of a firstborn, entrusting a great responsibility, told Zorian that this was a necessary trial for Kaelen to mature, to turn his dreams into practical experience. Zorian, though a nameless anxiety churned within him, finally agreed. He did not know that he had just personally pushed the son he most sought to protect into a carefully laid trap. The caravan departed from Palmyra in the brilliant dawn, But within the hearts of Kaelen's brothers was a pitch-black night. They traveled through familiar lands, then turned onto a desolate path where there was only sand and wind. At a dry oasis where an old well had long run dry, the cruel drama began. They surrounded Kaelen, the hatred no longer masked by forced smiles. It was stark in their eyes. "Dreamer," Darius snarled, "your dreams have troubled us long enough. Let's see what you can dream about at the bottom of this well." Kaelen was stunned. He looked at the faces that were once his brothers, now foreign and terrifying. He pleaded, calling each by name, but was met only with a stone-cold silence. They stripped him of his exquisite robe, the symbol of love and the source of their jealousy, and threw him into the deep, dark pit. The dry thud of his body hitting the bottom of the well was the sound of his faith in kinship shattering. Above, the light was just a small, shrinking circle, gradually obscured by the shadows of those plotting his fate. "Kill him," one suggested, but Reuben, an older brother from another branch of the family, who still had a flicker of conscience, intervened. "Let's not stain our hands with our brother's blood. Just leave him here. Fate will decide." But Darius had another plan, one that not only eliminated Kaelen, but also brought a small profit. At that moment, an Ishmaelite caravan, traders of goods and people across the desert, was approaching. "Why let him die for nothing?" Darius said, his voice cold. "Let's sell him. He will disappear from our lives forever, and we'll have a few pieces of silver." They pulled Kaelen from the well, his body bruised, his soul shattered. He was sold for 20 pieces of silver, chained to the back of a camel, and dragged toward a foreign horizon, toward the heart of the mighty Persian Empire. As the caravan's shadow faded behind the dunes, they dipped Kaelen's robe in the blood of a young goat and brought it to Zorian. "Father," Darius said, his voice trembling with feigned grief, "we found this on the road. It seems a wild beast attacked Kaelen." Zorian collapsed. He clutched the blood-soaked fabric, and the old patriarch's cry echoed mournfully through the house, a cry for his lost son and for the prophecy he had tried to hide, which now seemed to be swallowed by darkness. He did not know that his son was not dead. He was beginning a new journey, a journey of slavery, a road to hell on earth. He was being dragged along the very Silk Road he had dreamed of conquering, not as a merchant, but as merchandise. The journey across the desert was a long series of torments and humiliations. The searing heat, the biting cold of night, and the lashes from the slavers' whips hardened Kaelen's body, but it was the pain of betrayal that forged his soul. He had lost everything, family, freedom, honor, but in the depths of his broken heart there was one thing they could not take away: his dreams. They still came to him each night, no longer of sheaves of wheat or stars, but of vague images of a future he could not comprehend. Finally, the caravan reached Persepolis, the magnificent capital of the Persian Empire. In the noisy and squalid slave market, Kaelen was sold to a powerful man named Vorlog, the captain of the guard for the Shahanshah himself, the King of Kings. Vorlog's estate was a completely different world, a place of luxury with silks, brocades, and lush gardens. Kaelen was assigned the most menial tasks, but he did everything with extraordinary intelligence and diligence. He did not complain, did not resent. He observed, he learned, and he quickly proved his worth. Kaelen's talent did not escape Vorlog's notice. From a gardener, he was promoted to steward, then became his personal assistant, managing all the property in the captain's household. Vorlog trusted him completely to the point where he entrusted his entire estate to Kaelen's management and focused only on his duties at court. Everything Kaelen touched prospered. He thought he had found a sliver of peace, a glimmer of light in his dark life. But in that world of silk and finery, there was a danger more terrifying than the whips of the slavers. It was Lady Elara, Vorlog's beautiful but ambitious wife. She was drawn to the handsome appearance, the mysterious silence, and the outstanding talent of the young slave. That attraction quickly turned into a sick obsession. Day after day, Alara tried to seduce Kaelen. "Come to me," she would whisper, "and I will give you more than my husband's trust." But Kaelen always refused. "My lady," he would say, his heart resolute, "my master has put his trust in me. I cannot betray that trust and sin against God." His refusal did not deter Alara. On the contrary, it fueled the flames of desire and anger within her. She could not accept being rejected by a slave. Love turned to hatred. If she could not possess him, she would destroy him. One day, when Vorlog was away and all the servants had been given the day off, Alara executed her plan. She grabbed Kaelen's cloak, tore it, and shrieked. As Kaelen fled in terror, she held the piece of cloth in her hand and began to scream hysterically, accusing him of rape. When Vorlog returned, he was met with a wife weeping tragically and irrefutable proof, the piece of the slave's cloak in her hand. The rage of a man whose trust had been betrayed was more terrible than any desert storm. He needed no explanation. To him, a slave was forever just a slave. Without a trial, without an inquiry, Vorlog ordered Kaelen to be thrown into the most dreaded place in the capital, the Pit of Silence. It was an underground prison where condemned prisoners awaited execution, a place where sunlight never reached and hope was a meaningless word. From a trusted slave, Kaelen had once again fallen into the abyss, an abyss deeper, darker, and more hopeless than the dry well in the desert so long ago. The Pit of Silence. Its name said it all. It was not just a prison, it was a tomb for the living. The air was thick with the stench of mildew, despair, and approaching death. The only light came from the flickering torches lowered with meager rations each day. Around Kaelen were shadowy figures, those forgotten by society, political prisoners, the falsely accused, all counting down their final days. The silence here was not peace, but the silence of a dead soul, a silence broken only by moans, quiet sobs, and the grating of chains against cold stone. This was the bottom of hell. The physical pain from the beating he received before being thrown down was nothing compared to the mental torture Kaelen endured. He was betrayed by his own brothers, and now betrayed by his own integrity. He had done the right thing, yet the result was endless darkness. His faith in God, in justice, began to waver violently. He asked himself thousands of times, why? Why was fate so cruel to him? In the first few days, he just curled up in a dark corner, refusing food, letting despair consume his soul. The dreams also vanished, replaced by endless nightmares. He almost gave up, almost let the pit swallow him whole. But then, in that extreme darkness, something miraculous happened. He heard the cries of an old prisoner nearby. The man had just had a nightmare and was trembling with fear. Something in Kaelen stirred. Perhaps it was compassion, or perhaps it was a final spark of his former self. He dragged himself closer and asked what was wrong. The prisoner recounted his dream, a dream of a withered vine that suddenly budded and blossomed, and Kaelen, with an ability he did not know he possessed, interpreted it. "That is a good omen," he said. "The vine is you. Life will return to you. You will be free." A few days later, a surprise pardon from the Shahanshah was issued, and the old prisoner was indeed released. A rumor began to spread through the Pit of Silence. There was a young man who could decipher the whispers of the night. Gradually, other prisoners came to Kaelen, telling him their dreams, their last fears and hopes. Kaelen listened to them all. He interpreted dreams of death, bringing peace to those about to depart. He interpreted dreams of hope, replanting faith in withered souls. He did not do it to be praised. He did it to keep himself from going insane, to find a purpose in the meaninglessness. By bringing light to others, he lit a small candle within his own soul. The prison did not kill him. It transformed him. His will, forged in suffering, became sharper and more steadfast than any metal. 2 long years passed. On the surface, the Persian Empire was facing a crisis no one had foreseen. The Shahanshah, the King of Kings, who held the lives of millions in his hands, was powerless against his own dreams. Every night he had the same strange dream. 7 fat, healthy cows came up from the river, only to be devoured by 7 skeletal, emaciated ones. 7 plump, golden ears of grain grew, only to be swallowed by 7 withered ears, scorched by the east wind. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart filled with anxiety. He summoned all the magicians, wise men, and priests from across the empire, but no one could interpret it. The king's unease spread throughout the court, signaling a dark omen. At that moment, the Shahanshah's cupbearer, who had once been thrown into the pit of silence for a mistake and had been restored to his position, suddenly remembered. He remembered the young Hebrew man who had accurately interpreted his dream and that of the chief baker years ago. Trembling with fear, but also with hope, he went before the Shahanshah and told the story of the slave with the gift of interpretation. The Shahanshah, in his desperation, had no other choice. "Bring him to me," he commanded. Kaelen was brought up from the darkness. He was blinded by the sunlight he had not seen for 2 years. They shaved his beard, gave him clean clothes, and then brought him before the throne of the most powerful king in the world. Kaelen stood there, thin and pale, but his eyes burned with an unusual light. "They say you can interpret dreams," the Shahanshah said, his voice full of authority, but unable to hide his worry. "It is not I, your majesty," Kaelen replied calmly, "but God who will give you an answer and peace." After hearing the king recount the 2 dreams, Kaelen did not just explain their meaning, he painted a complete picture of the empire's future. "Your majesty, these 2 dreams are one. God is forewarning you of what he is about to do. The 7 fat cows and 7 plump ears of grain are 7 years of great abundance to come. But the 7 thin cows and 7 withered ears are 7 years of terrible famine that will follow. The famine will be so severe that people will forget there ever were years of plenty." The court fell silent. But Kaelen did not stop there. He outlined a bold economic and political plan. "Therefore, let your majesty find a discerning and wise man and set him over the land. Appoint officials throughout the country to collect 1/5 of the produce during the 7 years of plenty, storing the food in granaries. Then, when the 7 years of famine come, we will have food to save the people, and the empire will not be destroyed." The Shahanshah stared at the young man who had just emerged from prison. He did not just see a dreamer. He saw a leader, a strategist, a man chosen by God. "In all my empire," the Shahanshah said to his court, "can we find anyone else in whom the Spirit of God is like this man?" Then he turned to Kaelen and declared, "Since God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. From this day forward you will be in charge of my palace, and all my people will obey your orders. Only on the throne will I be greater than you." The king took off his signet ring, the ultimate symbol of authority, and placed it on Kaelen's finger. He had him dressed in the finest linen robes and put a gold chain around his neck. Kaelen, the slave who moments before was in the pit of silence, was now the Grand Vizier of the Persian Empire, second in command only to the Shahanshah. Fate, in an incredible turn, had lifted him from the abyss to the pinnacle of power. His journey was not over. It had just begun a new chapter, one in which he would hold the destiny of millions in his hands, including those who had betrayed and sold him. The 7 years of prosperity arrived just as Kaelen had prophesied. The lands throughout the Persian Empire overflowed with life. Fields of wheat rippled like golden waves to the horizon, and orchards were heavy with fruit. Under Kaelen's genius direction, a massive system of granaries was built. Food was collected and stored in quantities too vast to count, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. Kaelen worked tirelessly, traveling the country, organizing, supervising, and ensuring his plan was executed perfectly. He was given a Persian name by the Shahanshah, Zafnath Pa'aniya, meaning God speaks and he lives, and he married Asenath, the daughter of a high priest. He had 2 sons, and in the happiness of his family, the pain of the past seemed to fade. But then the 7 years of plenty ended. The skies no longer gave rain, the ground became dry and cracked. Famine, like an invisible monster, began to squeeze the life out of the land. The hunger spread to neighboring countries, choking the Silk Road, driving merchant caravans to the brink of bankruptcy. But in Persia, thanks to Kaelen's foresight, the storehouses were opened. Food was sold to the people fairly. Word of the only land with food amidst the great flood of famine spread everywhere. From all corners of the world, people flocked to Persia, begging for life. Meanwhile, in the oasis city of Palmyra, the famine had also extended its claws. Zorian's caravan was in dire straits. The warehouses were empty, the camels were gaunt. Hope was depleted. Zorian, now old and frail, looked at his son sitting sullenly and said, "Why do you just sit there looking at each other? I hear there is food in Persia. Go there and buy grain so that we may live and not die of starvation." Kaelen's 10 older brothers, including Darius, had no other choice. They prepared their camels and set out carrying silver to buy food. Only Leon, Kaelen's full younger brother, was kept behind. Zorian, having already lost 1 son, could not bear to risk anything happening to his youngest. After a long and arduous journey, the 10 brothers finally reached the capital city of Persepolis. They went to the place where food was sold and were led before the Grand Vizier, who was in charge of everything. The Vizier sat on a high chair, his face partially hidden by a finely crafted golden mask, a strange habit people said he used to protect himself from the evil eye of the crowd. He did not speak directly, but gave orders through an interpreter. As the 10 brothers bowed to the ground to show their respect, Kaelen recognized them instantly. Every face, every posture was etched into his memory by the blade of betrayal. A storm of emotions rose within him, pain, anger, and a painful curiosity. Had they changed? Were they still the same cruel men who had thrown their brother into a well years ago? He suppressed every emotion, keeping his voice, through the interpreter, cold and distant. He decided to test them. "Where are you from?" The interpreter's voice rang out dryly. "Sir," Darius replied, "we have come from Palmyra to buy food." Kaelen looked them over, then uttered a sentence like a thunderclap. "You are spies. You have come to see the weak points of this empire." The 10 brothers were stunned, their faces drained of color. "No, my lord," they hastily protested. "We are honest men. We are all sons of one father. We were 12 brothers, but one is no more, and the youngest is at home with our old father." Their words were like needles piercing Kaelen's heart. They were still lying, still saying he was no more. Rage nearly erupted, but he held it back. The psychological warfare had just begun. The masked Vizier remained as cold as ice. He would push them to the very edge of fear and despair to see if, within that, truth and repentance might sprout. "I do not believe you," the voice through the interpreter remained unchanged. "This is how I will test your words. One of you will remain here as a hostage. The rest of you take food back for your families, but you must return and bring the youngest brother you speak of. If you do not, I swear by the life of the Shahanshah, you will be treated as spies, and all of you will die." Horror enveloped the 10 brothers. They were thrown into prison for 3 days. In the darkness of the jail, they began to question themselves and blame one another. "This is surely our punishment," one said, "for what we did to our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. Now we are the ones suffering." Darius was silent, his face grim with torment. They did not know that Kaelen, through his interpreter, heard and understood everything. For the first time in many years, he had to turn away to hide his tears. Something had changed in them. But the test was not over. After 3 days, Simeon was held as a hostage. The other 9 were given food and sent on their way. But Kaelen had secretly ordered his steward not only to fill their sacks with grain, but also to return all the silver they had paid into the mouth of each sack. When they stopped for the night and discovered the silver, an even greater fear seized them. "What is God doing to us?" they whispered to each other. They did not understand this was another test, a test of their honesty. When they returned and told Zorian everything, the old father nearly collapsed. First Kaelen, then Simeon, and now the powerful man in Persia demanded Leon. "You are destroying me," he wept. But the famine grew worse, and they had no other choice. The psychological battle that Kaelen had engineered had reached its climax. After a long period of hesitation and being tormented by hunger, finally moved by Judah's promise to protect Leon with his own life, the patriarch Zorian nodded in anguish. The 9 brothers, along with a small, trembling Leon, brought the most precious gifts from their land and double the amount of silver, embarking on their second journey to Persia, a journey that would decide the fate of their entire clan. When they returned and presented themselves before the Grand Vizier, Kaelen saw Leon, his full brother, whom he had not seen since he was a boy. A wave of love and pain washed over him, almost causing him to drop his cold mask. He hastily ordered his servants to take them to his residence and prepare a lavish feast. The 10 brothers were extremely anxious, thinking they were being taken to his private house for punishment over the money from the first trip. At the feast, Kaelen arranged for them to be seated in the correct order, from the eldest to the youngest, a small detail that astonished and confused them. He asked about their elderly father, and as they answered, his voice nearly broke. He continually served them food from his own table, but Leon's portion was 5 times larger than anyone else's. It was a sign of favor, but also a knife that twisted deeper into their curiosity and fear. After the feast, as they were preparing to leave, Kaelen made the final, most cruel move in his test. He secretly ordered his steward, "Fill their sacks with food, return their money, but in the sack of the youngest, place my silver cup." This was no ordinary cup. It was the cup the Grand Vizier used for wine and, according to rumor, for divination, a sacred object. The next morning, when the group had barely left the city, Kaelen's soldiers pursued and stopped them. "Why have you repaid good with evil?" the captain roared. "Who has dared to steal my master's silver cup?" The 10 brothers swore their innocence. "If the cup is found with any of us, let that one die, and the rest of us will be your slaves," they declared. The search began from the eldest's sack to the youngest's. The tension was unbearable, and then from Leon's sack of grain, the officer pulled out the silver cup, gleaming in the sun. A cry of despair erupted. They tore their clothes, reloaded the grain onto their camels, and returned to the city in utter terror. This was no longer about loss or slavery. Stealing the vizier's property, especially an object used for divination, could be considered treason, an offense against the Shahanshah himself. The price could be all of their lives. They were escorted back to Kaelen's residence, and all prostrated themselves at his feet. The vizier's face behind the mask seemed colder than ice. "Why have you done this?" the voice boomed. "Did you not know that a man like me could easily discover this?" Silence filled the room. All excuses were meaningless. At this moment, Judah, who had promised to protect Leon, stepped forward. He did not beg for forgiveness. He recounted the entire story of his family, the pain of his old father who had lost a son, the immense love he had for Leon, the only remaining son of his deceased mother. He recounted his promise, and then he made a final offer, an offer that shook the entire room. "My lord," Judah said, his voice choked with emotion, "I cannot return to face my father without this boy. The grief would kill him. Therefore, please let the boy return with his brothers. As for me, I will remain here, your slave for the rest of my life, to atone for my brother." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Judah's offer was not a trick. It was a sacrifice, a true sacrifice. The brother who had once been indifferent to the life of one sibling was now willing to trade his own freedom for another. This was the proof Kaelen had been painfully searching for all these years. Repentance was not in words, it was in action. They had truly changed. Witnessing Judah's sacrifice, the wall of ice that Kaelen had painstakingly built around his heart for 20 years shattered. A tsunami of emotion, suppressed for too long, broke through everything. He could not bear it any longer. He could not continue to play the part of a distant vizier. "Everyone, get out!" he roared at the guards and servants, his voice cracking. "All of you, out!" When only he and his 11 trembling, astonished brothers remained in the room, Kaelen did something no one expected. He raised his hands, ripped the golden mask from his face, and threw it onto the stone floor. For the first time they saw the Grand Vizier's face clearly, a face both foreign from the marks of time and power, yet achingly familiar. And then he began to weep, not the cry of a vizier, but the cry of a long-lost younger brother. "I am Kaelen," he sobbed, speaking in the language of their homeland that he had not used for so long. "Your brother, the one you sold." The room fell deathly silent. 11 men stood as if turned to stone, mouths agape, unable to believe what they were seeing and hearing. The powerful Grand Vizier of Persia, the man who held their lives in his hands, was the very brother they had callously wronged. Horror, guilt, shame, and an unbelievable joy struck them all at once, leaving them speechless. Kaelen stepped closer, tears still streaming down his face. He looked directly into Darius's eyes, into Judah's, into each of theirs. "Do not be distressed," he said between sobs, "and do not blame yourselves for selling me, for it was not you who sent me here. It was God who sent me ahead of you to preserve life, to save our family and our people from this famine." The forgiveness was offered not with the arrogance of a benefactor, but with the clarity of one who had seen the hand of fate in his own tragedy. He embraced Leon, then embraced each of his brothers one by one. These large men, weathered by the desert winds, now wept like children. They wept for their sin, for their brother's pain, and for a reunion so miraculous it was beyond belief. Their tears mingled, washing away the hatred and guilt of 20 long years. The wall of betrayal had crumbled, and upon its rubble, the bridge of brotherhood was rebuilt, stronger than ever, bonded by the mortar of repentance and infinite forgiveness. News of the Grand Vizier's reunion quickly reached the Shahanshah. The king, far from being angry, was overjoyed for the courtier he held so dear. He commanded Kaelen, "Tell your brothers to bring your entire clan, your father, and all their possessions to Persia. I will give them the best land in the entire empire, the fertile land of Goshen. They will want for nothing." A magnificent caravan of chariots, a personal gift from the Shahanshah, was dispatched with Kaelen's brothers to bring Zorian and the entire clan. When they returned to Palmyra and recounted everything, Zorian fainted from sheer shock and joy. Kaelen was alive, and not just alive. His son was the man saving the world. The great migration of the clan began. They left Palmyra, a place filled with memories both joyful and sorrowful, for a new promised land. When Zorian and Kaelen were reunited, the father and son embraced and wept for a long time. They were tears of reunion, of pain surpassed, and of a happiness that could not be expressed in words. The entire clan was settled in Goshen, a fertile land where they could raise their livestock and thrive without fear of famine. Their future was secure, all thanks to the son, the brother they had once cast away. But the story was not yet over. There was one final knot to untie, a father's secret that had been buried for so many years. One evening, when it was just the two of them, Zorian called Kaelen over. He looked much older, but his eyes shone with a strange serenity. "My son," Zorian began, his voice trembling, "there is something I must tell you, something I have hidden in my heart for so long, a burden that has nearly crushed me." He explained that the favoritism he had shown Kaelen was not just love. It stemmed from a hidden prophecy. Kaelen's mother, before she passed away after giving birth to Leon, was also a woman who had strange dreams. She had dreamed it all, the bowing sheaves of wheat, the prostrating sun, moon, and stars, the vision of Kaelen at the pinnacle of power, saving their entire clan from a terrible catastrophe. "I was not showing you favor, Kaelen," Zorian confessed, tears rolling down his wrinkled cheeks. "I was afraid. I feared that great and perilous destiny. I was trying to protect you from it. That robe, that special attention, it was all a clumsy, desperate attempt by a father to hold his son back, to shield you from the thorny path your mother had foreseen. I tried to fight the prophecy, to fight fate, but I failed. My protection only fueled your brother's jealousy and inadvertently pushed you onto the very path fate had ordained." Kaelen was speechless. This final twist changed everything. The entire story of favoritism and jealousy was now seen in a completely different light. It was not the story of a father's blind love, but the tragedy of a father who knew his son's painful future and tried in vain to change it. His love was not indulgence, it was profound fear. Kaelen's journey was not just a fight against his brother's betrayal, but an unavoidable collision with a predetermined destiny. This final truth healed the last and deepest wound in the hearts of Kaelen and his brothers. They understood everything. There was no more blame, only understanding and love. The story that began with a family divided ended with a unity stronger than ever before. Together they looked toward a new dawn in the land of Goshen, where a new nation would be born, a nation forged in the fire of betrayal and reborn in the water of forgiveness. The prophecy had been fulfilled, not in the way they had feared, but in a way that only fate could arrange, magnificent and full of surprise. Kaelen's journey from the bottom of a well to the height of power in the heart of the Persian Empire is a timeless saga of destiny and choice, of how the darkest tragedies can become the path to the greatest salvation. It reminds us that even when we think we are drowning, perhaps it is just fate pushing us down so we can touch the bottom and launch ourselves higher. The power of forgiveness not only frees others, but first and foremost, it frees our own souls from the prison of hatred. And the Father's secret shows us that sometimes the actions we do not understand from those who love us stem from a fear and a love deeper than we can ever imagine. This story is not just history, it is a mirror that reflects our own lives. Thank you for joining our channel on this emotional journey through the burning deserts and golden palaces of the past. If stories like this, if buried mysteries and timeless lessons are what ignite the fire of curiosity in you, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because beneath the dust of history, there are countless legends waiting to be awakened, and we will awaken them together.